Hi, and welcome to another edition of our Web Supply Road live streaming sessions. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm the consultation lead for SNC Lavalin, which is the company providing technical support to the Webquay Supply Road in environmental assessment and preliminary engineering. My co-host today is a familiar face, Michael Fox, project facilitator for the Webquay Supply Road project. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing okay, thank you, Don. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mike. And today we have the pleasure of talking about a really interesting. Not that our topics are never not interesting, but this is a really interesting study. I think this is a really interesting study that our team has just started this past winter, and the focus of the study is on an animal that is quite mysterious, I'll say. With us today to talk about the Wolverine study is the principal investigator of the study, John Plaisir, who's an experienced wildlife biologist who works with us. John designed the study and manages all the work associated with it. John, how are you tonight?
I'm well, Don. Thank you very much. Good to talk to you. Good to talk to you, Mike.
Good to talk to you, John. I've been looking forward to this session for a while now. Lots of others, I think, have been as well. We're going to ask you lots of questions, and hopefully there won't be anything too hard for you to answer. I don't think there will be, because we work at a different level than you work at, John. So maybe, Mike, you might want to kick things off?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, excellent. So I think the first thing we should do is lay out the numbers for people to phone in. So we do have a toll-free number for our listening viewers here, 833-513-1223. Again, 833-513-1223. That's the toll-free number. You can get patched in and ask your questions, not just on the Wolverine, but any other questions related to Webquay Supply Road with that. So John, welcome. I've been fascinated with this topic ever since we started embarking on the study. So the first question I can ask you is, why are we studying wolverines as part of the Webquay Supply Road environmental assessment?
Well, wolverines are listed as a threatened species in Ontario. And so as a threatened species, they're protected under the Endangered Species Act. So in order to do a proper assessment for the Webquay Supply Road, we need to gather as much data as we can about all wildlife, but especially species at risk. Wolverine is a highly susceptible species to threats, including development caused by humans and also climate change. So it's important to get good information about this species and see how the project might affect them. And this species needs a special study that targets them because they occur at low densities. And so they're not an animal that we might see while we're up there regularly. We can't see where their habitat might be. And so we need really a targeted study design that allows us to get more insight into what wolverines are doing in the area.
Oh, that's really interesting, John. They are truly mysterious animals to many community members to a large degree as well. What are the potential effects?
Issue with the biggest impact from the project could be habitat loss. And so it's not just the road itself that provides habitat loss. It's also other kind of spin-off impacts resulting from the road. So there could be recreational activities that occur in the area during sensitive periods for wolverine, such as the denning season. And There's also trapping or hunting that might occur in the area, and even if they don't target wolverines, then the occurrence of people out in the bush might impact wolverines, and having a road might just increase the amount of traffic that is in the area. Speaking of traffic, road effects like collisions with trucks and other vehicles becomes a risk when a road gets introduced. And it also turns out that wolverines, and females in particular, will avoid roadways. And they've seen that out in the Rocky Mountains with some of the highways that go through there, as females won't cross the highways. So that's another potential impact that they might face.
And that's specific to females, is it, John?
Yeah, studies that have been done for roadways through Banff National Park have shown that that females are hesitant to go near the roadways, whereas something like a younger male, which is a wider dispersing animal, is perhaps more likely to cross the road or use crossing features on those roadways.
Interesting. You know, they are a rare occurrence at sighting or seeing these folks, or these mammals. You know, as a wildlife biologist, John, how does working on a wolverine study rank in terms of some of the things you've done in your own career to date?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Mike. It's a very interesting study to do because it's so targeted. Wolverines are very secretive, and they're considered kind of a mythical creature. So getting to do something that delves into the personal life of something that's so secretive is certainly more exciting aspect of the work that I'm doing. So a project like this also brings together a few other interests of mine, which include photography and building things. And so together I've been able to kind of combine those interests and add them into this study. And one other thing that's really neat about what this project aims to do is to identify individual wolverines. We want to know what are the individuals that are using the area around the road project, and are they male or female? Are they young or old? Might they have a den and have kits or kids at home? So those are the answers that we're trying to answer in this study.
Yeah, it's like the Wolverine's like the Super Bowl for the wildlife biologist, I guess. It's the pinnacle. It's right up there. It's for studies, isn't it?
It's an opportunity that comes around every day. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Well, maybe John, you can tell us a bit about wolverines in general. Where do they live? What are their habits? I mean, you've been looking at them in detail. Maybe you can give our viewers and listeners a bit of a background on the wolverine.
So wolverines actually occur in northern habitats across the world. They don't just occur in Ontario. In fact, Ontario is kind of the most eastern part of their range in Canada, but they extend through the boreal forest and the Arctic in Canada to Alaska. And there's a small population in California. They extend down into the lower 48 states as well. They also occur throughout the northern parts of Siberia and Scandinavia, and they even extend into Mongolia. So they're not just a North American species. They use a whole bunch of different habitat types, mountains, tundra, and Arctic. But they use kind of these more open habitat types, and they move around quite widely. that have been preyed upon by wolves. And so every day they're moving around up to 20 to 30 kilometers or more looking for food. And so males can have really large ranges, over 2,000 square kilometers that they move around in search of food. And females, on average, about 400 kilometers squared. So these animals, they move. They move around. They're constantly searching for their next meal. So that kind of shapes their livelihood.
That's pretty interesting. So what do they typically eat? They would typically eat carrion, right? Dead animals, like in this particular area, I would assume it would be caribou and moose, but they would go beyond that too, right? In smaller game. What about plants?
Certainly in the area of the Webequie Supply Road, moose and caribou would probably make up a significant portion of their diet, and they would be looking for wolf kills to get that source of food. They're not very successful hunters themselves for larger prey items. They don't work together in teams, and they don't have a very slick approach to try to catch food themselves. They will eat smaller animals, usually rodents like lemmings and ground squirrels, especially in the Arctic and in more mountainous areas in their range. But they will eat plants as well. They'll eat berries that occur across the tundra, like blueberries and cranberries. Or they'll raid food that's stored away by foxes. But to really speak to the opportunistic nature of these guys, they'll even eat whales that wash up in shoreline habitats or washed up seals on the coastline. So they have their strategy of moving around looking for the next wolf kill, but they will eat whatever they find along the way.
So would they, I mean, this is just, I'm just throwing this question out at the top of my mind. So would they maybe follow wolf packs to some degree?
Yeah, they would definitely know where wolves are, and they would definitely, keep on searching until that, the next wolf pack caught an animal, and then they could slide in there for a meal.
So, John, you talked a bit earlier about the Wolverines individuals, and do they have markings that make them unique? So Wolverines absolutely do have markings that make them unique, and that's a big part of the study that we've designed. Now, males can be distinguished from females as they're a lot bigger. They're 30 to 40% bigger than females. But other than that, Wolverines have unique markings on their body. They're kind of medium-sized animals, up to 60 pounds, and they're chocolate brown all over, and they have kind of beigey yellow lines that go around the sides of their body, and then over a unique set of markings that we call the chest blaze. And so the chest blaze is unique to each individual. And if we're able to take pictures of those chest blazes, then we can say, Frank's here, there's Frank. And if we see another picture with a different one, we say, that maybe that's Doris. So we can identify unique Wolverines based on those marks. And that helps with the study that we've started for the Webequie Supply Road.
Interesting. Given sort of the mystery wrapped around this species and they're hard to spot, has there been a lot of research done on Wolverines?
there is more and more research being done as time goes on, and the methods of researching them are getting better and better. As far as Ontario is concerned, a regional study in northwestern Ontario was done by the Wildlife Conservation Society, and they flew around in small airplanes and collected data on tracks that they saw. So that was what the first and only really wide-scale assessment of wolverines in Ontario. But there are other studies going on. Most notably in the Red Lake area, they're actually doing a capture program where they make these little log cabin traps that wolverines will find their way into, and then the log cabins will close, and then they're able to put collars around the wolverines' nets. And that gives a lot of information, because then through GPS and satellite technology, they'll be able to see where the wolverines move around to. And if it's a female, where they might be denning, and where they might raise their cubs, and where a male might roam around, and how far he might go from the spot where they caught him.
John, what have they been finding when it comes to the animals themselves and their movements? I'm just curious about that.
Well, I mean, they've been able to inform quite a bit on, what home range size is. That is the area where an individual will range between years and during the year. And that can be unique to individual or to unique areas. It might be different in the mountains as it is in the Arctic, as it is in boreal Ontario. So that's important information to know when we assess the impacts of habitat changes to the species. Another thing that's been poorly known, and still is to a degree poorly known, are the denning habitats and the denning habits of wolverines in Ontario. So collaring work is able to allow researchers to find more dens and then characterize what are being used for those dens. Are rock fields being used, like are being used in alpine or montane habitats, or are they denning underneath trees, areas where the tree has fallen over in a storm, and wolverines able to make a den underneath the tree? So those are the kinds of questions that the research helps answer.
John, are there many other animals that are as adaptable as a wolverine in terms of the different habitats they live in? I mean, you were telling us tundra, mountains, and boreal habitat. I mean, these are pretty diverse habitats. Sounds like a pretty adaptable animal.
It's adaptable in that it finds ways to find food and find shelter in different areas that have characteristics in common. And there are other species that are able to do that, but they face risks nonetheless. Another species that comes to mind really quickly is the eastern whippoorwill. It's a cryptic species of bird that comes out at night, and it occurs in a wide variety of habitats throughout eastern North America. And so those habitats are very different and occur across kind of climatic zones, but they have very similar structural habitats. They have open understories so that the birds can nest on the ground. And so, but they face their own risks or their own threats as well with there's scarcity of insects. They feed on insects at night, and they think that that's having an impact on the species. So, similar species, even though they seem adaptable and that they can occur in a wide variety of regions in the world, they nonetheless have their Achilles heel, so to speak, as to what makes them more susceptible to population declines.
John, do wolverines have any real predators?
Absolutely. Wolverines aren't the apex predator that some people might think. I mean, if you want to compare them to other species, you can compare them to foxes and coyotes. They're certainly a tenacious species, but the wolves are the apex predator in the north, and cougars could also be could be apex predators elsewhere. Wolverines depend on wolves, certainly in northern Ontario, depend on wolves for wolf kills. So they use the characteristics that they've developed to be able to bully other animals and to be tenacious and fierce and take what they want and defend it. Perhaps a little bit like a hyena in Africa. But they still depend on those other predators to provide sources of food.
That's interesting. It's quite an animal. Here's another one for you. Can you tell us how you came up with the study design, John, for the survey, and maybe give us some details in terms of how long the study will run?
So the study that we're implementing is an integrated study design that uses cameras and hair snares. And the system that we're using is called a run poll survey. And this was designed by a Wolverine researcher named Aubrey Magoon, who's from Alaska. And she developed it in the early 2000s with other researchers. And it was a really fantastic way of passively acquiring both visual and genetic data at the same time. So we used a description of her study that she initially published, and that has been refined and improved upon in subsequent studies. And we also used sampling protocols that was developed for Wolverine in Ontario, in part by the Wildlife Conservation Society and the NRF, as well as others. So we kind of merged the principles of those together, and it's similar to studies that are being used elsewhere, including in the Rocky Mountains and areas, particularly by a conservation project called Wolverine Watch, which uses both academic studies and also the observations of people hiking around in the Rockies to build a database of information for wolverines.
John, did you have to adapt the study design to our study area, to the Webequie study area a little bit? And if you did, in what ways did you do that?
Well, there are absolutely adaptations that need to be made, and perhaps the most important one is how we bait the structures, because we use bait to attract wolverines to our run poll stations, and because of the remote nature of our study, we couldn't do that without the support of members of the Webequie First Nation, who are able to provide bait items so that we can keep this study going. Other studies that are done in the Rocky Mountains or in areas of the States, they're a little bit closer to existing roadways, and so they'll use roadkill. They'll be able to order that up to make bait, and so we've really depended on the local knowledge and support of the Webequie community.
John, I'm interested in the sort of the regulatory context. Did you have to get permits to conduct this study? So can you tell us a bit about the process, and are there any conditions or terms, conditions that you follow associated with the permits?
Absolutely. We acquired 2 permits to start this study. The first being an Endangered Species Act permit from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP. And this we acquired this permit because we're going to be baiting a species at risk, which I spoke to a little bit before. It's a necessary part of attracting a wolverine to our study station. And also, we're collecting hair samples for DNA analysis. And under the Endangered Species Act, you're not allowed to be in possession or transport any part of an endangered species, a species that's listed as threatened or endangered or extirpated. So we need those permits in place so that we can move we can be in possession of the hair and then move it to a laboratory at Trent University to get the genetic material from the hair follicle analyzed. Also, we needed a wildlife scientific collector's permit from the Ministry of Natural Resources, and usually you need an animal care committee permit to go along with that. But it's important to note that we didn't end up getting one of these permits or needing one of these permits because the study that we're doing is completely passive. We're not, other than baiting, we're not trapping an animal, we're not harassing an animal. And so there's very, very low risk of any harm coming to a wolverine or any other animal through this survey. In that regard, we didn't need to go through that process.
John, to follow up on that, you mentioned these clips or to capture hair. Do they cause any harm to the animals as they go through that section of the run pole? And we'll actually have an image come up in a minute on the run pole apparatus. But I just thought I'd ask that question. It doesn't sound like they do because a permit isn't required.
The hair snare are a very effective and very important part of our study, but they're not invasive at all to a wolverine. It's akin to petting your dog or scratching your dog and you end up getting hairs that come out. So there's 2 posts that you'll see in the picture. I guess it's going to come up where and on each of these posts, the wolverine will walk between these posts, and then there's a setup of alligator clips that are held open like this. And when the wolverine disturbs the alligator clips, because they're being held open, they'll close and they'll pinch a little clump of hair in the process. And then when the wolverine keeps moving past them, they'll pull 3, 5, 10 hairs out of the sides of the wolverine, and then they'll drop. And what's really great about that is that the next time a wolverine or the next time another animal comes along to check out the bait, they might disturb different clips, but their hair won't get caught in the same clips that took the wolverine hair. So that way we make sure that we have really clean samples for genetic analysis. And also our study's done during the winter months and into the spring. So those are the times when wolverine hair starts to loosen up a little bit because it's going to shed the hair for the warmer months. And that means that towards the later end of our survey, the hair will also be loosened up already.
Okay.
So for a wolverine, it's just like scratching their sides on a tree or something.
So the run poles, basically, the intention is the animal climbs up the run pole, walks through the sort of short corridor with the clips to get the hair samples, and then it reaches up to the bait, right? It reaches up to the bait and then faces the camera. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, that's correct. Once the Wolverine walks past the hair snares, then there's almost a railing that's set up. There's 2 wooden posts and then a metal railing that's nice and thin to make sure that there's no obstruction of the view of the Wolverine. So they'll go up to that railing and they'll look up and investigate a bait that's hung right in front of the run pole, and that's where we are able to get our best data from. They sort of the run pole acts as a bit of a photo stage for Wolverines, because there'll be a camera that faces the run pole, which can take photos straight from the front, and then there's another camera off to the side that will take photos of the Wolverine as it approaches the run pole. So we have a camera that tries to get our best data, that take pictures of the front of the Wolverine, and then one that makes sure that we can capture the Wolverine on camera just in case he or she doesn't want to climb the structure.
And maybe a few other friendly visitors passing through, I guess, eh, John?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I just got notified. We had a few questions that came in. We can deal with some of them, Don. I'm assuming you're there. John, so this one came through Facebook. I'm just trying to read this verbatim here. Can there some sort of culvert be installed for line crossings by the Wolverines? Did you get the question, John? So can there be some sort of culvert be installed for line crossings by the Wolverines?
Okay, so basically, can there be a crossing structure that's installed that would allow the Wolverines to pass safely across the road? I would imagine to avoid collisions with any trucks or other vehicles that are driving on the road. So that's absolutely a possibility of something that could be done. In fact, in I believe it's Jasper National Park or Banff, they've created overpasses for wildlife to cross over the roadway. But as I alluded to before, is generally younger males that are taking advantage of that opportunity, as they're more wider dispersing demographic. As for going under culverts, I suppose it's certainly something that a Wolverine could entertain. But just given the length of the roadway and the fact that it's basically it would be a gravel road, the Wolverine might choose just to cross over the road unless there were many, unless it was so busy and there were so many crossings underneath. More likely, the Wolverine might avoid the road altogether.
So I think you might have answered this one, John. So we had a question come through email. So some countries have land bridges over or under highways. Is there something being planned for the animals to continue in their territory?
I mean, as of right now, I'm not privy to the specific details of the construction of the road itself. It's certainly something that could be considered. However, I don't know whether based on the behavior of wolverines, whether the cost of such a structure would merit its construction. So that's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, I mean, these kinds of things, John, I mean, they may come out for other species, right? And they may come out as conditions of the EA, right? And I know, like, just what you're saying there, I mean, we don't, other species in other areas like Banff, for example, maybe Jasper, when these structures have been built, they've learned over time to use them, right? So it's almost like learned behavior, isn't it? Over time, I know I've read articles before about other animals learning to gradually use these crossing structures that are put in for wildlife. So, I mean, my camera's on, Tony.
Absolutely, and Don, we see a similar thing, particularly for and probably apply to other animals mostly, but we work on another project in southern Ontario where we have we started with 80 cameras at 18 valley crossings under a 4 series highway, and we have found that over time those crossings get more and more use by bigger and bigger animals. Particularly white-tailed deer become more and more comfortable with those features. So that is a phenomenon that you see in those instances.
Oh, thanks, John. And we welcome these questions, and I'm happy that people are asking them. And we're open for more, if not just this session we're having here on Wolverine, but on future ones. Please join us again to ask such questions, because we'll have different subject matter experts partake in these things, and as the project unfolds, we'll get more clarity on some of these questions, answers on some of these questions. So Don, did you want to ask
about the run poles?
Yeah.
Yes. If our technical team can bring up the Wolverine run pole location map, that would be great, because I'm going to ask John about.
We've installed 25 run poles today. So based on the study area that was determined, the local study area determined for Wolverine, that worked out to about 2,500 square kilometers. And so based on protocols that we've used for surveying wolverines in Northern Ontario, generally we try to put out one run pole station or one survey station for each 100 kilometers square area. So the math added up to 25 locations, and so that's where we're starting here.
Yeah, because I remember looking at the map, John, and I saw these. I don't know if they were hexagons or something. What did that play, and what role did those shapes play in determining the locations?
Well, it's just a good way of parceling out the study area and providing distinct study units to use. The reason for the 100 kilometer square area is because that's a minimum home range for a pregnant or denning female wolverine. So if you can use kind of the minimum expected home range, then that's a good starting point for recording animals as they kind of move around and occur in your study area. So that kind of explains the basis of the 100 kilometer hexagon.
Okay. Sure, John. I thought we'd show just a brief clip of one of the instructional videos that our team put together, just to give people an idea of what we did out there.
So we have our bait here, and we're going to be wrapping it in some wire in order to hang it up on the line above there. So the bait has, if you're replacing it, will have already been strung up like that. There may be some wire that you're able to take down and reuse. Otherwise, I'm sure you'll be supplied with the correct tools. Okay, so we are setting up the alligator clips, which may or may not have been triggered, in which case there may be hair samples here to collect. So we're just resetting them now. I have tiny hands, so I use a multi-tool, but you might be able to do it with your own. What I do is I pinch the clip open, and I have my gloves on, so I can actually hold it from the sides here and keep it open like that. And then bring it around the side, open the second clip, and then carefully rest it in. Now we've secured the wire around the bait, and we have it approximately 1.5 to 2 feet over from the run pole, and then another foot or so up. There's a little metal piece up here where you're going to have to secure the nuts down and make sure that this is not going to move any further along the line.
Welcome back. That was pretty good. I enjoy those things. And we've got a couple more questions, John, through the YouTube live streaming that's happening. So, John, so when will this study be taking place, and for how long will it run? And the second question is, do you have to do anything with the bait to favor wolverines and defavor other species? So the first one, when will this study be taking place, and for how long will it run for? And do you have to do anything for the bait to favor wolverines or defavor other species? Good questions.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for those questions. Our studies right now is a 2-year study to collect baseline data for the Webequie Supply Road environmental assessment. So 2021 was our first year of study, and then we'll be collecting data in the winter of 2022 as well. As for the baits for the study, they're generally pieces of meat of wild occurring species, again, that the community has provided. And there's not much done that can exclude other species. We want to make them as enticing as possible. And so we do use a trapper's lure, a longer distance lure. So it's basically a stinky substance that smells somewhere between a musky, minky smell and a skunk. And so we apply some of this to the bait that we hang, and then we dab a little bit on the run pole itself. That's just the how we've started out using it. And this stuff was recommended by other wolverine researchers. And in the winter months, when the meat is kept frozen and the smell doesn't extend as far, then this stinky trapper's lure extends further and hopes to widen the range that we can attract in wolverines. But it also brings in other animals as well.
Excellent.
John, I've got another question here for you. Tell me a bit about what you've observed to date at the run poles, John.
So we're currently undergoing our second data collection visit right now. So we have staff up collecting camera cards and photos right now. But already we've seen that wolverines are visiting our run poles. We've had them at least 3 locations, and they're climbing the run poles, they're examining the bait, they're interested, and really interestingly, the first run pole that we put up, the very first one, we actually had a wolverine come that night to come check it out. So that was a really cool thing that we found. And we've got wolverines coming to run poles close to the Webequie community, and we've also got wolverines coming to run poles that are as far away as can be from the community. So even though we haven't been able to analyze all the pictures fully and see exactly how many individuals we have, we're still able to get some really interesting insight into how wolverines are using the area and where they're occurring.
So, John, just to follow up on that, our team is returning, I think, one more time. Are they before the end of this survey season? Is that correct?
Yeah, they'll do one final collection in May. And the reason we extend our surveys into May is because if there's denning females around, and if there's a den close to our study area or in our study area, then wrapping up our collections in spring will allow enough time to determine whether there's a nursing female. And maybe there's the possibility of catching kits on camera too, if she leads them to an interesting spot.
So, John, one quick question: what do the wolverines do in the summer, in the fall, when we're not surveying them?
They're moving around their home range. They're searching for more food, and or if it's a mom with cubs, she's teaching them how to be a wolverine.
Mike?
Well, I'm just trying to think of questions. So thorough. So how often do you have to get the memory cards and stuff like that? Because that, I'm assuming that's an important part of this program, I guess.
We visit the sites every 4 weeks or about monthly. And the reason for that is that we don't want to leave the stations unattended too long, that either all our hair clips get used up or that the hair samples that are there get contaminated by additional hair, additional genetic information. So it's important that we go out not too often, but regularly enough so that we can collect the data and keep it as intact as possible and hope for the best genetic analysis of the individuals that we capture. Also, we want to make sure that because the study area can get so cold in the winter, we want to make sure that the cameras aren't malfunctioning. They're designed to be deployed into minus 40 degree temperatures like are experienced up in the Webequie area. But we want to make sure that there's no batteries issues, there's no exploded batteries, that nothing's gone wrong, that the camera angles aren't off too much and that they can be corrected, and just make sure that everything's in working order.
John, how have the batteries held up in these? Because I know there was quite a stretch where it was very, very cold in Webequie this past winter. Have they held up okay? Like when you return to the different locations, is the battery usually dead at that point or almost dead?
The cameras that we're using are rated for very cold temperatures, as I mentioned before, and they're supposed to be able to last for up to 6 months on lithium batteries, which are good quality batteries that aren't affected too much by cold temperatures. But we've noticed some cameras that needed or that batteries were replaced. And that might have been that the batteries just reached like 50% capacity or something like that. And we want to make sure that fresh batteries are always present, because we only have a very small window to collect very valuable data. So we don't take any chances with battery life or with equipment malfunction, because every day that the cameras are out there and functional is very valuable.
John, sorry,
questions.
Mike, go ahead.
No problem, Don. So this is a live call. and it's from Aileen, I think it is, or Eileen. So she's asking, where's the map? Where's that map? So where's the map is in relation to where the road would be? I guess she's assuming the map where the run poles are in relation to the road. That's a very good question, because maybe we can start layering these things for people asking such questions. And the other one, the follow-up was, will there be a reduction in population due to the road? Again, from the same person, Eileen or Eileen. Thank you, Eileen. I appreciate the question.
It's tough to say exactly what the effect will have on the actual population of wolverines. One thing that we can expect is that wolverines would avoid a road, and so any dens that may occur close to where the road would occur might not be used in the future. So it's unlikely that there'd be a large number of direct deaths in the wolverine population due to roadkill. There's the population that if trapping could occur, then a few individuals might get caught, but it would be the avoidance of the area and then the abandonment of any really good habitat features such as den sites that would have the greatest impact, and it might just make the usable area of Ontario a little bit smaller as a result. For wolves.
Did you have another question there, Mike?
400 to 700 wolverines in Ontario. It seems like that's a pretty big range, but it's a really tough population to determine exactly because they're so wide-ranging. But currently there's about 400 to 700.
Did you have another question there, Mike? Or
No, that was okay. From Eileen. That was the two questions she asked.
Well, one I'm curious about, John, is when you go to get the cards from each of the cameras, how many photos are on the cards here? Like some cameras probably are very busy, right, and others are less. I'm just curious. Like, are there hundreds of photos on some of these cards?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the cameras only have a few dozen photos, but some of the cameras have hundreds. We do try to maximize the camera settings so that they take bursts of photos, so that we can get as many photos as possible once an animal is sighted, because they might just be walking by, or they might be climbing on the run pole and chewing on the bait. We actually have martens, which are a kind of a mid-sized, larger weasel that they'll jump from the run pole onto the baits and they'll start chewing away at the bait. And so you can get hundreds of pictures of those. Another neat thing that we've seen is groups of caribou that come and they check out the scent of the bait at the run pole, and they'll actually use the run pole to scratch their necks. So those have been kind of neat things to see. You'll see a picture and there'll be 5 caribou in the picture, and the ones like looking through the run pole at the camera, they're very curious and investigating. In those cases, you get lots of pictures.
And moose as well, too, right, John? I think we've seen a couple of moose in these photos as well.
Yep, we've got moose as well. They're not as common in the area as caribou, but we've got a few moose. We've got wolves in the photos as well. I'm waiting to see a lynx. Hopefully, one shows up. So yeah, and there's birds like Canada jays that get recorded as well. So they're very active sites, and you get a little bit. It's like you're peeking into the everyday life of the boreal forest in the winter.
Mike, did you want to ask about some of the observations at the sites?
Yeah, Yeah, that's that's a good question. What have you seen thus far? I guess given the fact that they were just installed this season, right? Like, was it beginning of winter or?
Yeah, in late January, weren't they, John?
Early February? They were installed in February. So
are you seeing more activity at at certain run pull stations than others? That's kind of what we're looking for with the question.
Some run pull stations are busier than others. At this point, I can't give a complete summary of which ones have been busiest, but some of the sites, especially those where through other surveys that we've done over the winter, like a caribou collaring survey, we knew that caribou were pretty common in those areas, and that's definitely reflected in the photos. Because in some of those areas where we were seeing caribou, there's lots of caribou that show up in the pictures, and wouldn't it be cool if a collared caribou showed up on a Wolverine camera?
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah, that's an achievement, John. Definitely. John, when will the team be going back again to check the run polls? And that's coming up, I guess? Is it in May? That would be the last visit?
Yeah, May will be the last visit, and then cameras or bait will be put back up next winter, in the early winter, probably January. So then it'll start again, and we'll be able to learn from learning points that we've had this year. That being said, we've had a pretty successful year. We're just happy everything's worked out well, and we haven't had any catastrophes. All the cameras have worked well. So we'll look forward to starting it again and seeing if we can get even more photos from Wolverines that have been to these sites before and realize that there's nothing to worry about, and maybe there's a little snack to be.
Wow, that's a great session today. John, I can't thank you enough. You speak very clearly, and you know your subject inside out, and I think this was probably one of our better sessions in terms of just amount of information conveyed. I'm sure community members will want an update, a regular update on what's being seen. I know they keep those photos rolling in so we can share them with our friends in the community. Mike, that wraps up the session. Do you have any final words of thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share with us?
I guess the last point is I really appreciate the audience asking questions through our different channels. I think Facebook, YouTube, call-in, and emails and texts. If we mentioned pictures and videos throughout the programming, our hope, or actually our goal, is going to be sharing that, not just on the website, but if you follow us on social media, on our various platforms, we'll be sharing those through those as well. And thanks for joining us. Join us again next week on Wednesday, April 28th, 6 to 7 p.m. For a discussion on the recent Caribou GPS collaring survey. With that, stay healthy, and we hope to see you again next week. Thanks for joining us. Be good.
Thanks again, everyone. Take care.